What's going on, YouTube family? My name is Daniel Walcott, and welcome back to my channel where we discuss all things real estate investing, wealth building, and home ownership. And today I want to talk about first-time homebuyer programs. More importantly, why some people decide not to use them. Seems crazy, right? When my wife and I, when we purchased our first home, we didn't use a first-time homebuyer program. I will get into that later in the video. If there's money out there, why wouldn't people want to use it? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah, they tryna at me, I'm running the race. I gotta pick up the pace. They throwing shade, but I'm gone. You gotta keep it a buck to my face.
Now, as you guys know, first-time homebuyer programs come with a ton of benefits. I mean, they can be used for down payment assistance, they can be used to lower your interest rate, and they can be used to cover your closing costs even. But there are some downsides to consider. Number one is income restrictions. Many first-time homebuyer programs have income limits that prevent borrowers from qualifying. Now, when we think about programs or assistance that either the government provides or maybe nonprofit or different programs and organizations, they typically would look at what's known as the AMI, which is the area median income, or the MFI. Yeah, that's right, which is the median family income. They're pretty much the same. It's basically taking a look at the median, or it's not really the average, right? Yeah, it's the median, right, that's why the word's in it. Yeah, it's the median income for an area or a neighborhood. And so depending on where you live and depending on the program, they may be looking at statewide, or they may be looking at citywide or neighborhood-wise, right? There's different census tracts that they look at to determine if you were to qualify for a certain program. One thing I found, however, is that the programs in the DC metro area are fairly generous with their income limits. HPAP, for example, has an income limit of $109,000 for a household of one and $125,000 for a household of two. DC Open Doors, which is another program for home buyers in the district, they actually have a income limit of, I think, $154,000, and that's for that's a borrower, right? And so I'll explain the difference a little bit. One thing, when you're looking at these programs, you have to take a look at if they're doing household income, meaning that everybody who lives in a home has to report their income, and that's what they're basing it on, or if they're going to do off of just the borrower's income, meaning whoever is going to be on the loan, that's the only income that they're looking at. Maryland Mortgage Program is a really popular program in Maryland. They have a income limit of, I think, like $170,000 for like a household of one or two. So fairly generous in our area, but I do know in some other areas that's not the case. Reason number two is property restrictions. Some programs only allow you to purchase certain types of properties. One thing that you have to understand about home loans in general is that the loan that you get has to match up with the property. For example, you can't purchase a fixer-upper using a VA loan. It's not going to qualify. They're not going to lend you the money to do that. You probably won't even be able to purchase a brand new construction home with an FHA 2 or 3K, right? That's a specific construction loan. VA, the property has to meet certain standards. Same thing with FHA. And so the same thing applies to programs, right? If you're using a program, they want you to use it for a specific type of property. Usually single family homes, townhomes, condos are fair game. I know with NACA, you can also use it to purchase multifamily, but there are some programs out there that won't allow you to purchase multifamily homes or co-ops if you're using a program. So that's another reason why somebody may decide not to use a program, because they either wanted to purchase a multifamily or a property in an area that the program doesn't cover. Number three is time limits. Many programs have requirements that you have to live in the property for a certain amount of years before you can satisfy the loan for it to either be forgiven or for you to be in compliance. And so that can be an issue if you've only planned on living in the home for a short amount of time, or if you only planned on owning the home for, let's say, 3 years, 4 years. And so that's one thing that you really want to pay attention to when you're reviewing the terms and conditions of these first-time home buyer programs, because you have some programs that may be forgiven if you live in it for maybe 5 or 10 years, some may be longer, some are not forgiven at all. However, they are due once you either move out of the property, refinance, sell. And so one thing that you have to understand as a home buyer is that there's a difference between occupying a home and owning a home. A lot of these first-time home buyer requirements speak specifically to you occupying the home, meaning that once you decide to rent it out, they may knock on your door and say, hey, I want my money back. Is it likely? Don't quote me on this. Probably not. However, you do want to be aware that there are consequences if you don't follow whatever was put in place, the agreement that was put in place for them to give you the money to purchase the home. And that kind of leads into number 4, which are the repayment requirements. The time limit, or the amount of time that you actually have to be in the home, is only one factor that may kind of kick in repayment. Also, if you were to refinance the property, as I mentioned before, if you were to move out or sell, that money is now back due, right? There's a difference between a loan and a grant. Some first-time homebuyer programs are grants, some are loans. It's important to know the difference. Grants don't need to be paid back. If it's called a grant, you don't have to worry about that, right? So that language is important to understand. Is it a first-time homebuyer loan, or is it a first-time homebuyer grant? Now, we love grants. Grants are great, and grants don't have to be paid back. However, if you were to use a program and it's not forgiven, or maybe not forgiven over the course of a certain amount of years, when you do sell or refinance, it's going to be paid out of the equity, right? So if you sell your home, you pay off the loan, which is your first trust. And your second trust is typically going to be that first-time homebuyer program, and that's going to be paid off secondly. And then whatever's left over, that's what you get, right? Same thing with refinance. When you think about refinancing, that's just you paying off your old loan with a new loan. And some first-time homebuyer programs will require you to pay off that loan in order to refinance. Number 5 is credit requirements. A lot of first-time homebuyer programs have stricter credit requirements than your typical loan that you would qualify for. So as you guys know, with an FHA loan, you can qualify for as low as 580 or 600 credit score. However, with a lot of these programs, it's a minimum of 640 or 680. And that reason alone may deter some people from using the programs simply because they don't qualify, right? You have some programs out there that don't look at credit at all, like NACA, and you have others where if you don't have that credit and everything is perfect, you still can't qualify. And so that is a reason why some people may forego using the program, simply because their credit is not where they need to be, but they do want to purchase a home, and maybe they have the money, so they don't necessarily need the program in order to purchase. Number 6 is probably the most common. If I was to guess, I would say this is the most common reason people don't use first-time homebuyer programs, and that's because it adds an extra layer of complexity to the process. Purchasing a home itself is a tedious and stressful process, and so when you add that extra layer of using a first-time homebuyer program, some people just may not want to do it. Now, not all programs are created equal, and by that I mean some are more involved than others. There are some programs out there that are very easy to use. You don't actually have to apply on your own. You simply tell the lender that you want to use a specific program, and if you qualify, they'll do the rest. Others like NACA and HPAP require a lot more work from the buyer. To me, it seems like the more money they give you, the more legwork you have to do in order to get it. And that may mean meeting with a housing counselor multiple times or taking a home ownership class. At the end of the day, if you don't have the money and one of these organizations is willing to give it to you, do what you got to do. It's a short-term pain for long-term gain. The 7th and final reason why some people decide not to use a program is because some programs will charge you a higher interest rate for the money that they're going to give you in down payment assistance. A lot of these buyers are rate sensitive as it is, and so they understand that the higher your interest rate, the higher your monthly payment. Here's my advice. As long as your monthly payments are at a place that's comfortable for you, go ahead and take the money, especially if you can't buy a home without it. At the end of the day, it's important to weigh the pros and cons of the different programs and carefully consider how the specific terms and conditions will impact your long-term goals. It may be helpful to consult with your real estate agent or your loan officer to determine which program, if any, is right for you. Now, as I mentioned before, I didn't use a first-time homebuyer program with our first house. Reason being, our loan officer, our lender, just didn't tell us about it, right? At that point in time, I didn't know what programs were available. Like, you would think that your loan officer would just tell you. And that's not the truth, because some programs are run by the state, some are run by the county, and some are run by like organizations and nonprofits. And sometimes your lender or the bank that you're working with will have their own internal programs. Now, they're not necessarily obligated to say, oh, hey, you should do this program or you should do this program, because in truth, it adds an extra layer of work to the lender already. And if they see, hey, you have the funds and you don't need it in order to close, they're not going to say, oh, hey, yeah, you should do this program. And so we didn't really have the best lender, unfortunately. And so if I was to change anything about that experience of us purchasing our first home, I would definitely use a program. Like, we would have saved probably about $10,000 that could have been used for the next property, furniture, whatever, repairs. And so I'm a proponent of first-time homebuyer programs. I think if you can use it and it makes sense, go ahead and use it. If you guys have any questions about programs specifically in the DMV area, let me know. Drop them in the comments. I appreciate you guys for sticking around. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. If there's anything else that you want me to cover or talk about, let me know. You can find my information in the description below. Peace.